continuing on with our end of the year top 10s. This is going to be the top 10, what I'm calling elite scale Mattel wrestling figures. So basically, anything from the Mattel WWE Basic, Elite, or Ultimate lines are eligible for this list. In front of you are the 5 figures that were really close to making the list but didn't quite. But what this is going to be is the 10 figures in that scale, again, that is the basics, the elites, and the ultimates, that really struck in accord with me. The only thing they had to have done this year was get purchased by me this year. These are not the top 10 figures that came out. These are not the top 10 figures on the market. These are 10 figures that had to be purchased by me within the year of 2023. With all of that said, this is one of my main lines to collect. Easily, possibly my favorite modern line to collect. The only competition it really has, to be honest, is the DC Multiverse line. So, we're going to see what were the figures that really spoke the most to me this year. Number 10 is a figure of mixed emotions for me. Ever since I first saw it nearly a decade ago, I was in love with the Defining Moments Macho Man, and I only this year managed to track down the figure. That said, it came at a time in which we were all excited for the Ultimate Edition Macho using this attire, but that figure got cancelled. It might still come out down the line maybe, but there is a little bit of resentment to this figure. The fact that I could have had the update but got him instead, and to be honest, he just doesn't hold up to figures that came out a decade after. Nor should he. He's still a spectacular figure, but he doesn't have the modern accoutrement, the articulation, the better face sculpts. But this is still an incredible Macho, one that I love having, but I'd be lying to say it wasn't also just a touch bittersweet. I'll be honest, I was really going back and forth in my head over if I wanted to give this spot to the consultant Mr. Perfect or to the manager Rick Rude Build-A-Figures. They basically use the same body, we're just changing out heads, and of course, consultant Mr. Perfect has Mr. Perfect on his back. In the end, I did wind up going with the Mr. Perfect in the suit. I just like it a touch more, though the Rick Rude is also an incredible Build-A-Figure, and the two of them are the best Build-A-Figures that Mattel's wrestling line has ever done, in my opinion. Who knows, I might be changing my tune after we see what figures come out this year, but I just don't see anyone touching these two, and this Mr. Perfect, in particular, is just a wonderfully well done toy. At number 8 is a figure I was really down on in their review. This is the Ultimate Edition Mattel Creations Cody Rhodes, and I'll be honest, the AEW Supreme is the better figure, it still is, but there are a lot of things I do like about this Cody. The jacket, even though I think the fully plastic one looks better, this one does have a nice gleam on the shelf, and I do like a lot of this figure and what it brings to the table. I think it's one of the better Mattel Codys still, easily the best one when it comes to just being more unique, more standout than the others. Cody's my main guy, he had to have had a figure on this list. I think this is my favorite of all the Cody Mattel figures so far. It's just a shame that I can very directly compare it to an AEW figure that was maybe just ever so slightly, well, not ever so slightly, a great deal better. I feel like a lot of people really slipped on this Commissioner Mick Foley figure. Sure, you take the flannel off, there's not much going on here, but with all the accessories you got, and just how wonderful this era of Mick was as a performer, this is a real standout figure of the year for me. I mean, you got the cactus, you got multiple hands, you got the gavel. Honestly, if they updated his articulation just a bit, he had enough to be an Ultimate Edition figure. Even still, I think he was a major bang for your buck and one of the best depictions of Mick Mattel has ever given us, and also one of the most unique. We don't get a lot of Commissioner Foleys, at least not Attitude Era Commissioner Foley. For all those reasons, I have to give this one a thumbs up. Look, I know what people are thinking, but I had to give WrestleMania Dusty a place on the list. I mean, he's my channel icon at this point. He had to be represented. I know people complained about his face sculpt, but I love it. It's so goofy and so wonderfully Dusty. I love the polka dots, I love the articulation, I liked the accessories he came with. He's not the best Dusty ever made. He's not even the best Dusty I got this year, but he is a wonderful Dusty and a wonderfully unique Dusty. And for all those reasons, he has to be on my list. Plus, like I said, when he's basically the face of my channel, it'd be really weird if I threw him under the bus now. Look, this list has had a lot of oddball picks, I know, but I'm going to make you a promise right now. These next 5 are, without a doubt, borderline Grail pieces. They are, for my money, the best depictions of these wrestlers out there, or at least amongst the best depictions. It has to start with this Ultimate Edition Eddie Guerrero. More than a little bit inspired by the original Legends Eddie Guerrero, this is the best figure of Eddie we have ever received. So many hand options, so many head options, the super tight Latino Heat shirt, the wonderful belt. This is the best depiction of Latino Heat in plastic form. I am in love with this figure, and I'm still kind of debating if I should bump it up a few spots on the list. I'm happy with it at number 5. I think it should be at number 5. I had just enough issues with this figure, not the least of which being the fact that it was just so hard to find, that I think this is where it should be on the list. Not anything against the figure, but Walmart, the fact that this was an exclusive to Walmart, really did bog it down for me and a lot of other collectors, because we all wanted Eddie, and yet so many of us couldn't find Eddie. That said, Target's always been just a touch better with their exclusives, and I have to admit, I really love their Ultimate Edition Bret Hart, the pink and black attack. He of course came with a jacket and a lot of accessories, but I kind of like him just plain. It's a wonderful Bret Hart, easily the best Ultimate Edition Bret Hart for my money, and I think it can really stand head and shoulders above the rest, just due to the fact that this is an all-pink Bret, and weirdly enough, it's kind of hard to get figures of him in his mostly pink attire. Look, I don't know what the popular consensus on this figure is, I really don't. What I'm going to say is the Ultimate Edition RVD, even though it was also a Walmart exclusive, just like Eddie Guerrero. 1, he was easier to find, and 2, I think he's the better figure. I adore this RVD. They got his attire perfect. He has a great head sculpt. His belt actually spins, which is awesome. And at the end of the day, I just like RVD a lot. And maybe I'm crazy, but it feels like we get less figures of RVD than we do get of someone like Eddie Guerrero. That's probably not for faulty reasons. To be fair, RVD is, contracted to different companies, yada, yada, yada. The fact of the matter is, though, it just feels a little bit more special that we got an Ultimate Edition RVD. And even though him and the Eddie are both wonderful, wonderful, wonderful figures, and I wholeheartedly recommend them both, I do have to give the ever so slight nod to Rob Van Dam. Number 2 almost seems prophetic. I said, when I first reviewed this guy in very early January of 2023, I said, I think this figure might make it to the top 10. And here we are, a whole year later, a whole year of wonderful figures, so many amazing figures I can't even begin to start, and yet I would still put this guy at number 2. This Wolfpack Hogan might be my favorite Hulk Hogan figure of all time. Warts and all, he does have faults, don't get me wrong, but the head sculpt, the belt, the era that this represents, the uniqueness to it, the fact that it's an NWO Hogan, but not, white and black NWO Hogan. Wolfpack Hogan has everything I could want and more. A absolute standout figure, and a figure, I'm going to admit, I very briefly considered making my channel icon until I wound up going with the Dusty. That's how much I liked this figure. But there was one figure that honestly kind of slipped through the cracks, a figure I was not expecting to like so much. And yet when I was making this list, I couldn't imagine anyone else as my number 1. That's right, you Mississippi sweat hogs. The Coliseum Collection Ultimate Edition Rick Rude. I don't know what it is about this figure. It might be the fact that we don't get many Rick Rudes. It might be the fact that, much like Mr. Perfect, I never realized how much I liked Rick Rude until recently. But this figure is just everything I could want and more. One of my favorite Mattel figures of all time. A figure I like so much that even though I bought the pack for Jake the Snake Roberts, I put Jake away and was more enthused just playing with this Rick. That's how good this figure is. And there we have it, my 3 favorite Mattel offerings for the year, at least in this style. Now we're going to have to see if I do another wrestling list, I might, and we're going to see what other top 10s are coming out so we can finally close the book on 2023.